Martin Li, also known as Mr. Negative, has superhuman strength and reflexes, healing touch, mind control, access to advanced technology and secret laboratories, the ability to switch between reversed and regular appearance, and charging melee weapons with black electrical energy. Martin Li has crossed paths with the likes of Spider-Man, the Punisher, and Cloak and Dagger.
Martin Li is an undocumented Chinese immigrant from Fujian province who attempted to travel to America to be with his wife. His mode of transportation, the Golden Mountain, was a slave ship operated by the Snakehead Gang as a way to sell Fujian captives as overseas slaves in Kenya. During a storm, the ship's crew evacuated, leaving captives alone to make a break for the New York shores.
Li was the only survivor and spent the following years building a large fortune and dedicating himself to helping those less fortunate. It is later revealed to be somewhat false, though Mr. Negative kept the false identity for only a short time. It is revealed that Mr. Negative was actually one of the crew members of the Golden Mountain.
When the ship nearly crashed onto the New York shores, he stole the identity of one of the deceased Fujian slaves, the real Martin Li, who was heading to America for the aforementioned reasons. This gang member was eventually captured by the Magia operative Don Silvermane and experimented on with a synthetic drug created by Magia chemist Simon Marshall that could be more potent than heroin. He escaped with the help of 2 other experimental inmates and soon developed 2 personalities, the kind-hearted Martin Li and the evil Mr. Negative, the latter of the 2 developing the ability to generate a black electrical energy that could be used to heal, control others, or charge objects with his touch.
The Mr. Negative side dedicated himself to becoming Chinatown's kingpin of crime, while the Martin Li side attempts to run the Feast Center with humility. Martin Li operates a soup kitchen in Chinatown, the Feast Project: food, emergency aid, shelter, and training. Despite being a crime lord, Li is a seemingly kind and generous man.
The Feast Project has displayed healing powers for people of various illnesses, although the cause of this healing is yet to be revealed. Eventually, Mr. Negative first comes into conflict with Spider-Man when he makes a power play toward taking control of New York's criminal underworld by attempting to wipe out all of the existing members of the Carnelli and Magia crime families, using a DNA-specific bioweapon called the Devil's Breath. In exchange for leaving the Magia family's children alive, he takes a sample of Spider-Man's blood to use in a Devil's Breath formula.
Mr. Negative later tries to use the Devil's Breath formula to kill Spider-Man during a fight with the Magia, but Spider-Man is able to hold his breath long enough to escape alive. Spider-Man then recruits the Black Cat to help steal the web-slinger's remaining blood from Mr. Negative and replace it with a vial of pig blood, so Mr. Negative is unaware of his loss. Martin Li endorses Bill Hollister for mayor of New York City, putting him against Randall Crown, adding him to a list of opponents, many of whom become targets of the criminal menace.
It also causes him to become the target of a smear campaign by Dexter Bennett, editor of the Daily Bugle and supporter of Crown. After Menace is revealed to be Hollister's daughter and Hollister resigns as mayor, Li unsuccessfully runs in a special election, losing to J. Jonah Jameson. Mr. Negative later recruits Hammerhead and offers to put the man's brain in a new robotic skeleton after having been shot point blank in the head by Underworld.
Hammerhead agrees, and Mr. Negative has his surgeon, Dr. Trauma, perform the procedure. Mr. Negative eventually comes across Eddie Brock, giving him a job at the soup kitchen. A touch from him causes Brock's cancerous cells to completely disappear.
Also, remnants of the Venom symbiote fused with Brock's white blood cells react with Mr. Negative's power, causing Anti-Venom's existence during a conflict with Mac Gargan, the Venom symbiote's host. After the Feast Center is torn apart during the fight between the two, Li discovers from a group of sweatshop workers from a shop owned by Crown that they were experimented on with drugs from Oscorp.
Later, Mr. Negative and his inner demons encounter and battle anti-venom. In the aftermath, Brock watches Mr. Negative turn into Lee, becoming the first to be aware of his dual identity. Later, Mr. Negative refuses to submit to the Hood's rule of conquest of New York's criminal underworld.
During a meeting with Hood's henchman, White Dragon, Mr. Negative corrupts White Dragon and sends the man to attack Hood's headquarters. In retaliation, Hood decides to attack and kill Negative. Hammer seals Chinatown on Hood's behalf, and an all-out brawl erupts around Lee's estate.
Hood's gang gets the upper hand until Spider-Man arrives to rescue Martin. However, Spider-Man too is corrupted and sent into battle on Negative's behalf. Spider-Man attacks and pummels the members of Hood's gang who are attacking the criminals' headquarters, and Negative then sends the web-slinger to kill Betty Brant, who is interviewing the real Martin Lee's widow and is coming close to the truth.
The Hood himself then confronts Negative at his Chinatown headquarters and battles him. During the battle, Mr. Negative tries to corrupt Hood but fails. Norman Osborn ends the blockade Hammer has on Chinatown when Hammerhead hands papers implicating Oscorp in the aforementioned drug tests on immigrants.
An irate Hood decides to kill Negative anyway, but he escapes. A later conversation that Osborn has with his own, split, darker green goblin side reveals that he now has an alliance with Mr. Negative, similar to the one with Hood. However, Spot slips in and steals back the evidence of Oscorp's tests, revealing being Negative's mole in the Hood's gang, under the promise that he will be cured once they get the revenge on the Magia.
Later, Negative takes advantage of the conflict against the Hand in a plot to set up a criminal establishment there, only for him and his inner demons to run afoul of Spider-Man and Shang-Chi. Mr. Negative later has an encounter with Jackpot and Boomerang. Further, Negative is targeted by both Anti-Venom and the new Wraith.
When they, along with Spider-Man, interrupt a heroin smuggling operation, Wraith uses visual recognition software linked to every television broadcast in New York to publicly out Negative as Martin Lee. When the police approach, Negative and his men retreat. Lee is later seen locked in a room by Mr. Negative's men, who wait for him to change back into their master.
Later, Mr. Negative is told of a prophecy that he is destined to be killed by Dagger. Negative and his henchmen invade a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility as a way of taking advantage of the war between the Avengers and the Phoenix Five, but Hawkeye and Spider-Woman defeat them.
It is later revealed that they were informed about Mr. Negative's plan by Madame Hydra, who wanted to get rid of the competition. Negative is seen meeting with the self-proclaimed Goblin King, Phil Urich, who is now leading the Goblin Underground's remnants, when it came to them awaiting for S.H.I.E.L.D. to help divide the criminal underground following the original Goblin King's defeat. Their meeting is crashed by Black Cat and Electro, who demand their share of the plan.
When Mr. Negative and Urich refuse to listen to Black Cat, the woman reminds them that they were all outed by Spider-Man and will succeed in the goal of defeating Spider-Man. Later, Martin Lee is arrested at some point. He was rescued by Cloak and Dagger, who had been corrupted by his touch, and are using patches of the drug known as SHIELD to stimulate the effects of Mr. Negative's touch and remain loyal to him.
After the two break Negative out of the prison ship where Lee was being kept and restoring him to Mr. Negative, he leads an assault on Parker Industries' Japan branch. Peter Parker gets attacked by Dagger, while Cloak teleports Mr. Negative behind Peter, where he manages to touch him. Fortunately, Peter is able to escape being corrupted by Negative. Cloak and Dagger manage to help Negative escape when Peter tracks the two to his Hong Kong headquarters.
After Mr. Negative returns to Lee, Negative reveals in a video message that he is targeting a philanthropist named Shen King-ho, who was once the criminal that led the Snakehead Syndicate, which was in charge of the slave ship where Lee became Mr. Negative. Through the video message, Lee accepts Negative's proposal. The plan fails when Peter does not slip Shen the drug that would have prompted the man to confess his own sins during a live broadcast, with Negative's impulsive attack giving Spider-Man the chance to cure Cloak and Dagger of the loyalty to Mr. Negative.
The criminal is able to inject Shen with the drug before escaping, but only a select few overhear Shen's confession, and most were already aware of his past, concluding that it doesn't matter so long as the man continues to do good. Although Mr. Negative flees the base where he was working with Cloak and Dagger, the now cured heroes vow to remain in Hong Kong to protect it from his future efforts. It initially appears that Martin Lee has no knowledge of his evil side.
Lee took Eddie Brock into a back room he calls his inner sanctuary, where he claims to play a game of Go day by day against an unknown opponent who he has never seen, claiming that he has learned that it's okay to enjoy the game. When he transforms into Mr. Negative, Lee's appearance resembles that of a photographic negative. Prior to his transformation, Martin Lee was a member of the Snakehead gang, whose true name has not yet been revealed.
Both Martin Lee and Mr. Negative personas are the result of experimental drug tests done by magia chemist Simon Marshall, the same tests that powered Cloak and Dagger, namely Cloak's association with the Dark Force. Unlike the two heroes, who were each given a power over light and dark, the gang member was given both a light and a dark side. As such, Mr. Negative considers himself an embodiment of black and wickedness, and both of his personas view the balance of good and evil as a necessary part of the universe.
The two halves, while fully aware of one another's existence, take no steps to interfere with one another, with the Martin Lee persona even taking such drastic steps as allowing his bad side to corrupt May Parker to keep it a secret. Mr. Negative displays a degree of superhuman strength, high enough to send Spider-Man flying through two buildings with a single blow. Mr. Negative also demonstrates superhuman reflexes during his battle with the Hood, dodging bullets or cutting them in half with his sword.
He also has the power to charge up knives and swords with black electrical energy, a form of dark force energy, and he can corrupt people he touches in the same manner, bringing them under his control.
A corrupted person's clothes change colors to his photographic negatives, and all who are corrupted praise their new master with proclamations like, "Mr. Negative was never born, so he is ever living," or "He is attached to nothing, thus he is one with all." It's shown his corruption is more effective the more good the affected person was before their conversion. White Dragon, a criminal himself, gained vastly increased stamina and endurance, but was still easily dispatched. His clothes reverted to normal once he was killed. Conversely, Spider-Man, considered a hero in every respect, was corrupted into a spiteful and angry criminal, despising every value he held dear and no more above killing.
Mr. Negative's corrupting touch appears to be ineffective against beings with supernatural powers, as Hood is unaffected when Negative attempts to corrupt him. Negative claims that this is because the Hood's soul belongs to a being even darker than he is. It has since been revealed that while Negative can renew his influence on others, he cannot corrupt someone once they have broken free of his initial influence already. Mr. Negative's alternate Mr. Lee persona seems to have the power to cure others. A simple touch from Lee completely cures Eddie Brock of his cancer and combines the remnants of the Venom symbiote in his blood with his white blood cells, creating a new symbiote named Anti-Venom that possesses similar healing powers.
Aside from this, homeless people who have stayed at Martin Lee's shelter have rapidly recovered from many illnesses or injuries that suffered from. It is possible that his healing touch is supposed to be the opposite of Mr. Negative's corrupting touch. It's revealed that Anti-Venom can be affected by Mr. Negative's energy because it negates his healing ability.
Mr. Negative also has access to advanced technology and secret laboratories, in which he's able to give his subjects medical care far more advanced than that available to the general public. Mr. Negative is often accompanied by several henchmen, known as his inner demons, who wear samurai-style masks, also known as Oni mask, Oni meaning demon, and use high-tech electrified versions of swords, knuckles, and various other Oriental weaponry, such as gun staffs and nunchucks. They are able to regenerate from even the most lethal wounds within a matter of seconds, as they've been shown almost immediately recovering from impalement, gunshots to the head, and even getting torn apart or decapitated. It has been implied that the inner demons can be killed under the right circumstances. At one point, Anti-Venom claims to have killed some of them, possibly by suffocation, which he later notes to be an effective tactic against them.